Hello,
Oh, hello.
hello everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Anara Tabashaliva, along with co-host Dr. Victor Fett, Dr. Katerina Shrey, and our program producer Professor Larry Shrey. We host a weekly discussion panel on Russia's war on Ukraine with guests from Ukraine, military experts, medical personnel, academics, artists, literary figures, and relief workers. Our panel is recorded and circulated nationally and internationally. We appreciate your comments and feedback. Special thanks to Marshall University Libraries and MUIT for making this weekly event possible. If you're joining us live on Teams, please feel free to use the chat to post questions for our guests. A quick greetings to our viewers in Ukraine from Dr. Katerina Shrey.
Вітаємо наших слухачів в Україні з глибоким покліном. Ми далі свідки вашого страшного терпіння і також вашої великої сили. Дякую вам за вашу участь в нашій тижневій програмі.
Thank you. Today's guest will be introduced by Professor Victor Fett.
Thank you, Anara. We are honored to welcome today on our 111th meeting our local friends and colleagues, Tri-State Sunflower Seeds, Aid for Ukraine, the local nonprofit group. John Yeager and Dr. Bob McCollister are here to report on their wonderful activities. This is a group which exists for quite a considerable time right now here in the tri-state. For those who are watching us from afar, this is West Virginia, Ohio, and Kentucky corner in rural United States. Please, dear friends, tell us about what is going on with you.
Thank you, Dr. Fett. A lot has happened since our last visit here. Again, we are Tri-State, we are Sunflower Seeds Incorporated, Tri-State Aid for Ukraine, centered in Huntington, West Virginia, but we have members of our board from Ohio and Kentucky as well. I'm going to kind of just go through a checklist here of things that are going on, and we continue to be motivated and excited and hopeful. Then we like to say our primary product, if you will, is hope. Hope for the refugees, hope for those in Europe who are on the ground doing the work, and hope for our people here who are looking for an outlet to support this humanitarian effort. But in terms of updates, and thanks to you, Victor, we were able to make a connection with the American Coalition for Ukraine, and our representative, Patrick Grace, is en route to Washington via Amtrak, and he'll arrive at about 5 o'clock today to the Ukraine Action Summit. If people don't know, the American Coalition for Ukraine was established in 2022, right after the Russian invasion. It's comprised of nearly 100 organizations now, and that's something that Ukraine and Sunflower Seeds needs to look into as far as becoming members of this coalition as well. I'll just read their mission statement. American Coalition for Ukraine believes in democracy, freedom, human rights, and dignity for all people, and in particular for Ukrainians who are giving their lives in defense of these principles. Our coalition partners call the United States home, but many of us share historic experiences of oppression, violence, and war in our countries of origin and ancestral homelands, many times at the hands of Russian imperialism. We wholeheartedly support Ukraine in its defense of the universal values of freedom, and human dignity. So beautiful mission statement. Just in terms of specifics, the Action Summit will actually begin in earnest tomorrow with panels and networking opportunities. That will go on Saturday and Sunday. And then on Monday and Tuesday, they will meet with the associated congressional delegations from West Virginia, Ohio, or wherever across the United States. So the Patrick will be participating in those as well. He's contacted our delegate, of course, here in West Virginia 1, which is Representative Carol Miller, who I've said before has been helpful. Also, Mooney from West Virginia 2, and then Senators Capito and Manchin. And part of in addition to the lobbying effort, and part of the networking will be in line with our organization's mission, which has to do with inspiring others to replicate what we've done here in the tri-state in support of Ukraine, the establishment of a 501(c) locally where people can trust those of us who are gathering funds and not just send it to some anonymous agency. So our theory of that idea has proven out. People are very willing to give to people they know and can see eyeball to eyeball. So I'm hopeful that again this idea can be replicated across the United States. And then any questions on that one as far as the Ukraine Action Summit before I go on? Okay. I want to give an update on our Orange connection. For those of you who don't know, one of our board members, Dr. Sandrine Pierre, is from the area of Orange, France. She found out early on when we started that they were a sister city with Yaroslavl, Poland, which is only 25 miles from the Ukraine border. So Yaroslavl contacted Orange to help in providing aid to the many, many, many refugees who were coming through that area. And that has continued. Many are still housed in that area. So as of, so in early March, Orange made their 6th delivery to Yaroslavl. Our organization helped pay for some of that, roughly 2,200 pounds of material and supplies. We purchased 504 meals of the MRE military type and 3 combat level stretchers, in addition to $4,000 worth of ramen noodles. And Victor, do you want to get up those slides now and we can see what that kind of looks like?
Yes, 1 second. I'm sharing my screen with those images right now.
So here they are. Looks like they're loading here wheelchairs and other medical equipment. Some of those big black bundles are the packages of ramen noodles. As I said, to date, there's been 6 deliveries, and that totals over 13,000 pounds of supplies going to Yaroslavl and beyond. We have other pictures from before, where some of the combat level first aid kits reached to the front lines into Kharkiv, and I'm gonna is it say it Zaporizhzhia? How do you say it? Say it again.
Zaporizhzhia.
Yeah, that one. and I'm sorry, I'm not very good with my Ukrainian. But the point is, we have from Little Huntington here, have supported life-saving equipment all the way to the front lines, which gives me a lot of hope and gives our organization a lot of credibility for sure. So unless there's any other pictures, are there any questions? We will have given over $15,500 to date to our friends in France to purchase humanitarian aid materials. We participated in 2 of the 6 deliveries thus far. And overall, we have raised over $40,000 since we started just a year ago in February. So we're very proud of our efforts. I see somebody in the chat says that's a lot of noodles. Yes, it is. That's a lot of noodles, but it's a good. I mean, when you think about it, it's a good, quick and safe food source when all you have is water to boil. Are there any other questions?
Yes, please. We open now to the questions. Dr. Deutsch, please.
I just wanted to mention, John, that a collection was taken up last night at Great Decisions, and Chuck Gruber should be handing over an envelope with some money in it soon.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was hoping to get some information from him as to when he meets, because we wanted to send some folks there or one of us to talk. So if you can kind of be our liaison with Chuck. I send Chuck all our information because he had expressed interest in, of course, what we're doing, obviously. But thank you for that collection. And if you don't care to
Well, we meet 8 times in the winter, spring, and we had our last meeting last night. I'm sorry to say, but we did collect money for sunflower seeds.
Okay, no worries. Thank you. We really appreciate it.
For those who do not know, Great Decisions is another local activity group founded by our former Marshall University professor of history, Chuck Gruber, and they have been meeting for several years, and they're our colleagues and friends. They collected money last year for the volunteers in Ukraine, and this year their donation goes to sunflower seeds. Thank you, Dr. Deutsch, and thank you, John. Anyone else, please, comments or questions or something for discussion here, because John and his people are doing something very wonderful. Again, for those who are not local, they are setting up an example of a small town here in rural West Virginia, not in big metropolis, to do some real action without middlemen, connecting to people in Europe who physically drive loads of trucks to Ukrainian border, because from the very beginning we realized here that shipping equipment or food or whatever to Ukraine from US is prohibitive in terms of simply mailing those containers, which many of our friends continue to do and collect things. So instead of this, the strategy was to collect money for our allies in Europe to pay for gas and everything for delivery. And this has been propagated by sunflower seeds and like groups since that. So any activity at local grassroots level in small towns like ours is, I hope, taken root in those months of the war. Thank you. Anyone else? Katerina, please.
Yeah, and I'm very, very grateful to Sunflower Seeds and so impressed with how quickly you have grown and how wholeheartedly you've embraced this cause, and deeply grateful on the behalf of not much myself, but the Ukrainian diaspora, and what a great model you are creating. I remember at one of your events, you had our mayor speak, and he spoke very passionately about being at some sort of a national meeting of mayors, perhaps, or something like that. And they were all told to be back after lunch at a certain time. And when they did, they had the mayor of Kiev on screen talking to them in real time. And I know, as much as the material help, the financial support is absolutely essential, the Ukrainian people are so grateful and benefiting from the human investment. Like I know that there's not as many Ukrainian flags flying here and there now. There's a little bit of fatigue with all that, but especially in those early months, you've no idea how outpouring of gratitude just for that you are not alone, and they're still not alone. They still have us. I do think, obviously, I'm grateful for the support because this is my heritage, but I'm also a mother of draft age sons here in this country. And before this gets any worse, I'm just praying. Well, we all are. My question is that we have heard from other guests and from people that we are talking to about coming on our program about long truck lines at the border, long waits to get aid into Ukraine. Do you have any stories, anything you can add to that from the drivers who are actually taking the things that you buy over into Ukraine from Yaroslav?
I've heard those stories, I think, as well. I've not heard any problems, of course, getting to Yaroslav. We have not been told explicitly, but I think, let's just say the material that's getting into Ukraine is maybe, I don't want to use anything illegal, but it's being done quietly. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
So I think, I don't want to say much more than that.
Okay,
Other
well, thank you for providing. It's so important for other countries to provide, sadly, the materials of war, but for the people in those countries to provide individual goods. There are several. I know of several efforts that are not same model as yours, but quite close. And Philadelphia sends shipments of blankets and hygiene products, just basic stuff. And things of tourniquets. I mean, sadly, things to keep people alive. So thank you for that.
That's one of the, not to interrupt you, but that's one of the, I would say, one of the highlights of our organization, because we have people in Europe and because they're communicating with the people in Poland, they know exactly what they need. So when you saw those wheelchairs, that's because somebody said we need wheelchairs. When you hear ramen noodles, that's because somebody said we need ramen noodles. So we all heard stories of, people sending stuffed animals early on, but it's kind of hard to boil a stuffed animal, I think.
Yeah. No, in fact, the Saint Sophia organization in Elkins Park on the borders of Philadelphia did the same thing. They actually had an Amazon list for the city of Ternopil of what do you need, and some of those items were really surprised. Like tourniquets, which when we think of tourniquets, I think we don't understand the medical tourniquet, but it's literally medical tourniquet kits, blood clotting stuff. So yeah, no, I think what you're doing is amazing. I'm wondering, as you do it here, do you, for your various fundraisers, when you interact with the public, are you getting a sense of fatigue about the war? I know I've actually been told by people not to refer to it as the war in Ukraine, but to refer to it as Russia's war on Ukraine, so that people don't get sick and tired of it and somehow negatively associate Ukraine with this horror that's happening. In that sense. Yeah. So how are people receptive? Because I mean, I definitely have heard from people like, not our problem, not our war. And it's hard. I get it. I mean, I understand that. But I do think, like, in the sense, again, I'm not just Ukrainian. I'm a mother of 3 draft age sons. And so I think we all are very aware that it's not going to end with Ukraine. But how are people interacting with you? Are people still as supportive as they were in the first days, or?
That's a good segue into what I was going to talk about next, which was our benefit prayer service, which we held at First Presbyterian Church here in Huntington on February 24th. Last year, when we were at Edslow Park and recognizing 1 year of war, we had probably, I think, 130 people. This year, I think we had under 50. Which is an indicator of the fatigue factor. Now, the good news is we have raised more money this year for that event, and I'm not sure I really understand that, other than perhaps because we did become officially a 501c3. That may have contributed to that, but that's good news. And I get it, and I know you get it. People, it's fatigue is a big problem. Now we have had early on, we had some comments about the America First thing and so on, and our standard answer is, yeah, you're right, and this country is wealthy enough and to do both. And I try not to say, like, to that person, what have you contributed locally lately? I don't say that, although I'm tempted to say, and how much have you given? I don't say it, but I think it. And
well, and I was really impressed. One of our previous guests is a forensic accountant, and actually took on that challenge of, the money's just all disappearing, going to corruption. And he actually said he actually did a very I'm sorry that I'm forgetting his name. He's somewhere from Montana, Minnesota, but he and his team did a forensic look at where the money's going, and they were able to account for just about all of it. So that was that actually helped me a lot too, because you do wonder, okay, so where is it going? Well, it turns out it is being used appropriately, which is very comforting.
Well, and I wrote an article, op-ed lately for our local paper, and that was one of the things that I pointed out, was that 90% of the money, we don't just give equipment, we give the money, they buy the equipment through the Pentagon. Okay.
Yeah.
So
90%
of the money we actually, quote unquote, give comes back into the United States for the purchase of these military goods. So, and then in the process, we give them our old stuff, but stuff that isn't brand new.
Stuff, right. It's stuff that's going to be retired soon.
And then, but then because of the income, the U.S. is able to upgrade our own military equipment. So it's a win-win scenario under those circumstances. But people don't think that hard. I don't think sometimes they just see money going out. They don't see the rest of the story. I did want to share something quickly. I wish Sandrine was. Oh, by the way, we are in the process of that event on the 24th was 2 hours. I tried, no matter what I do, I try to keep it short, and it always goes a little long, but I don't care. It's such a it was really a wonderful service, by the way. I mean, people really did miss something special, because we had wonderful musicians and speakers, but and so we are in the process of paring that down to about a 45-minute presentation that we can use elsewhere. But I just want to, and again, I wish Sandrine was here to read it, because this is the message from the Ukrainians, translated from, I guess, Polish to French to English. And we're going to be putting this in our video material at some point, but it reads, friends, thank you for your help and your solicitude. This is everything you have given us. It may save someone's life. It may help someone in a very difficult situation. We are working and always in contact. I promise that we will send pictures. Thank you for not letting this group down. Our team is very happy that you answered. You all have good hearts. Our gratitude is without limit. Peace to all. Glory to Ukraine. So that is that makes it worth everything right there. But we're gonna do we have a video. Well, and Dr. Fett can probably give us an update maybe in a minute about after I'm done about the documentary that's being done through Samuel Fellington. But we'll be including those words that I just said in the February 24th video that we do.
Pastor Yeager, thank you for that. I'm gonna jump off and let Victor take over. But thank you so much for sharing that with us, and thank you. God bless you for everything you're doing.
Thank you, Katerina. Just to mention what John just told about. Yes, there are plans. It's a project in making, but we were approached by a young student who is a film major, and he was interested to get involved to make a full documentary based on our activities right here, including sunflower seeds and also some of the most dramatic footage we had on this program in 2 years. In our more than 100 weeks of footage, we have accumulated some very moving personal accounts and stories, including those directly from Ukraine. So there has been work locally in Morgantown, West Virginia, and we hope to report further. We have whatever they call it, some kind of screen draft and the storylines, and we will be happy to continue this work. And this is something of a new development here. But again, thank you for organizing this, John. And if I may invite others to talk about their local or other experiences, I see some new people here and some people who have been friends of our programs for over 2 years. It's really a remarkably long time, and I'm very proud of you, all of you, joining constantly. It's probably in my memory, in my almost 30 years at Marshall University, it's probably the longest project we ever undertook together. Thank you. Please, Bob.
Okay. First of all, I just want to say that it's really an honor to be part of this organization, Sunflower Seeds. And it's really John that's the driving force here that does all the organizing and all the planning. Patrick Grace, who inspired us to get started, and Sandrine, who provided us with connection, and to Orange and all the other people on the board and the people that volunteered. It's just really amazing to be part of this. My job is just try to explain to people in the tri-state why this matters. That kind of task is kind of fallen to me. And I've been out here a couple of times, and I don't want to, go over the same ground I've covered before. But one thing I do want to emphasize today is, and I said this at our last meeting, is that historically, you don't often see recognized turning points in history as they're happening. They usually only are visible in the rearview mirror. But I really think we're at a turning point in the history of Western civilization, especially in post-World War II history. We're in the longest period of great power peace since the rise of the nation state, and I think that's now threatened. And the decisions we make literally in the next few weeks could have really important long-term ramifications. The NATO alliance is probably the most successful alliance in human history because it's the only alliance I know of that ever won a world war without firing a shot. I mean, the Cold War really was World War III. And NATO's strength and unity and America's role in it made that victory possible. And right now we're worried. We're worried that the decisions we're about to make could have really negative long-term effects. See, the alliances are always built on a couple of things, a couple of very simple things. First of all, threat perception. The NATO alliance was joined in 1949 on, gosh, I believe it was April the 12th. I think this is the anniversary. No, excuse me, it was April the 4th, sorry. But it was formed because of perceived threat from the Soviet Union, threat that grew over time through the Cold War. At the end of the Cold War, that threat perception receded a great deal. People talked about the end of history. Francis Fukuyama, I think he meant it a little more in a more complicated way than that, but he talked about the end of history. And Europe became the most peaceful continent on Earth when for hundreds of years it had been the most warlike. But now that's all changed. If you had a chance to see Nara's excellent presentation about a month ago, she talked about the threats. And if we don't make the right decision in the next few weeks, those threats are going to escalate. If Russia were able to conquer Ukraine, I've said this many times before, the incorporation of Belarus and Moldova would follow very quickly. And in particular, the threat to the Baltics and to that little corridor that Anara talked about that connects Belarus, Russia, through Poland to the Baltics could become critical. If you listen to Putin's interview with Tucker Carlson, he made some pretty threatening comments about Poland itself. So people in Europe feel this threat perception very greatly right now. If you listen to the leaders of the Baltics, if you listen to the leaders of the Scandinavian countries, if you listen to Macron, if you've listened to Macron recently, he has talked a lot about the growing threat from Russia. So they perceive this threat. The problem is the second element that underlies any alliance is trust. You have to believe in an alliance, in an anarchic international system, that your alliance partners are trustworthy. And it's that trust that has always been the cornerstone of the NATO alliance, particularly the trust that the United States would come to the defense of Europe from day one if a war were to break out. I mean, famously, Lord Acton, the first Secretary General of NATO, said the three purposes of NATO are to keep the Russians out, the Americans in, and the Germans down. But the real purpose from the very beginning was to so tightly integrate the defense of Europe with the defense of the United States that the Soviets, now the Russians, would understand that they had to fight the United States from the first day of the war, and that would deter any Soviet or Russian advance. That commitment is now in question. With the dithering that Congress, the supplemental was proposed in October. We're now into mid-April. It still hasn't passed. And it's still not clear if it's going to pass. That has called this commitment into question. Comments by other folks have brought that into question even more. So this is a really, sorry, got a phone. I'm doing this from my mother's house. That commitment is now in question. And that has frightened people all across Europe because they now no longer completely are confident that the Russians understand they'll have to fight the United States from the first day of any future war. And that undermines NATO in a way that it has not been undermined since 1949. And I don't want to go into this too much because I've talked about a lot of this stuff before, even on this podcast. But one thing I don't think gets mentioned enough, and it's something I studied a great deal in graduate school, and that's nuclear weapons and nuclear proliferation. There are only 9 countries in the world that have nuclear weapons now. It could easily be far more than that. I mean, we think of nuclear weapons as this advanced technology, when in fact, nuclear weapons, if you watched Oppenheimer, nuclear weapons were developed in 1945. In 1945, TVs were the size of the desk that I've got my computer propped up on. Now we have TVs that fit in our pockets. This is old technology. The things of what has kept nuclear weapons from spreading around the world, there could be dozens of nuclear countries right now, have been a couple things. First of all, the arms control process. At the height of the Cold War, there were about 68,000 nuclear weapons between the United States and Russia. But through the SALT agreements and the START agreements, the ABM treaty and all the other associated, the INF treaty, all the other treaties that we negotiated, that number has now come down to between 12 and 13,000. So we've made dramatic progress. It's still way too many, but we've made dramatic progress. And the other part of that is the non-proliferation treaty, the treaty that was negotiated by the United States and the Soviet Union and then signed by almost every country on Earth to limit the spread of nuclear weapons to more and more countries. And those two, that has helped keep that number, to be honest, in some ways astonishingly low. The other thing, and this is where I get back to the point of NATO, is that a lot of countries that could easily have developed nuclear weapons have chosen not to because they are protected by American nuclear weapons, by what we call our nuclear umbrella. We have told our NATO allies, we've told the Japanese and the South Koreans, we've told our allies around the world that have chosen not to build nuclear weapons, that we would defend them with ours. That if the Soviets were to launch a nuclear attack on them, we would defend them with our nuclear weapons. So they lived under our nuclear umbrella. In the Cold War, we even told them it was a NATO doctrine because through much of the Cold War, we forget this now, the Soviet conventional forces were considered to be massively superior, and our allies were reassured that if they invaded with their tanks, we could respond with nuclear weapons, and we kept American tactical and short-range nuclear weapons very close to the front lines to reinforce that commitment. They have lived for decades now under the American nuclear umbrella. But if NATO comes into question, if America's commitment to defend our European and our Asian allies is questioned, then Germany and Japan and South Korea and other countries across Europe, Poland's leaders have talked about this explicitly, they might have to reconsider whether or not they will build nuclear weapons. The war in Ukraine is incredibly important for the future of world security. And if we don't want to live in a world with 20 or 30 nuclear powers, it's important that we help Ukraine win this war. If you listen to General Cavoli, American 4-star U.S. Army General, Supreme Allied Commander in Europe, testified, 2 days ago, and said it is pivotal that we get weapons to Ukraine that Ukraine could lose. This is a turning point. It is important for us to get through to our congressman. It's already passed the Senate. We need to get through to our congressman. I'm going to call Congressman Brad Winstrup today and encourage them to vote for the supplemental, and if Speaker Johnson will not put the supplemental on the floor, to vote for the discharge position, because I guarantee if it gets to the House floor, it'll get over 300 votes. This matters. And with that, if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thank you, Dr. McCollister. This was brilliant and very timely. We cannot tire reminding people of what is going on because most do not pay much attention. Dr. Smith, please.
Thank you, Dr. Fett. I'm trying to lower my hand. There we go. Are you Dr. McCollister, Mr. McCollister? How do we want to call you?
You can call me either.
It's Dr.
I am a
Dr.
doctor, yes.
McCollister.
Yes,
You can call me
awesome.
Bob. It doesn't matter.
Bob. Dr. McCollister, I just wanted to say a couple of things and just say, you know what? I'm willing to go with you to Washington, D.C. and go and talk with our representatives and go see if we can get an appointment with Mr. Johnson. I would go with you. I'm a professor at Marshall. I'm a counseling professor. I have nothing to do with international affairs. I will say this, my father, whose name is also Bob Mitchell, he designed the fire control and the guidance systems for the Polaris, Poseidon, and Trident II missile systems.
Oh, wow.
For the nuclear submarine fleet during the Cold War. I was born at the height of the Cold War. And I remember my father many times saying it was a really cool way to win a war. And he said that they purposefully, he worked in special projects. He's passed away now. So I think I can talk about this at least a little bit. He was very careful not to say too much about what he did. But he said that they kept in touch with their Russian counterparts and let the Russian counterparts know exactly what we could do. And we knew what they could do and they knew what we could do. And there got to be kind of a relationship, at least at that point. Now, this is in the 60s now, 1960s. There was a relationship between the working class people who were working on the nuts and bolts of these things, like my dad. And they did have a regard for one another. I'm not convinced, and again, I don't have anything to do with the State Department, international affairs, or anything. I teach mental health counseling. I mean, I'm as far away removed from that as you can be. But it's my sense is that I don't think those lines of communication are as open, and there's a lot less trust and a lot less communication. And the lack of communication is building this sense of xenophobia and us and them and that kind of thing. I just really, really worry about what is happening with the lack of communication. There's a lack of communication even within the United States. I don't think we're communicating along clear lines with one another anymore. And I think when you have an opportunity to sit down with people and speak in just really clear terms, people start to connect the dots. And I'm hoping that, I forget, I'm not sure of the right way to refer to him, but Mike Johnson, Speaker Johnson,
Yes.
that he would please begin to start connecting the dots and to understand that there is something a lot bigger happening here than what affects the Republican platform, the Democrat platform, the House or the Senate. We're talking about humanity and our future together. I'm very grateful for the way you laid this out and how European countries are scared that they cannot trust the United States anymore and that they may have to build their own nuclear arsenals. I mean, there's a big thing going on. All right, do you care to rejoinder on any of that?
No, you're absolutely right. One of the things that developed, and a lot of it came out of the Cuban Missile Crisis, when we walked right up to the brink, and the mechanisms for communication were pretty rudimentary. I mean, we have the hotline, which was really just a teletype. And it scared John Kennedy and it scared Nikita Khrushchev. And what develops through the arms control process and through, like you talked about, these very clear meetings that we had, military to military meetings through the arms control process, also technological developments as both sides developed the ability to launch satellites so that they could see that the other side was not preparing for a first strike. So you could see what the readiness level was. I mean, that kind of communication helped foster what we used to talk about all the time in the nuclear community, crisis stability. Because in the experience of the Cuban Missile Crisis, it was we had real crisis instability. And luckily we had a president who kept his head and listened to advice and had read history, had read particularly Barbara Tuchman's book, The Guns of August.
Oh, yeah.
And that was critical in keeping dangerous situations under control, like the Yom Kippur War in 1973, where we went to a DEFCON 3 alert and the Soviets understood. I mean, it was, those kinds of things are critical. And those things, you are absolutely right. Vladimir Putin has nearly destroyed all those channels. He's pulled out of the INF treaty. He has made it clear he wants to pull out of the New START treaty. The Russians have even more aggressively integrated nuclear weapons into their defense plans. They talk about escalate to de-escalate and all kinds of stuff. And those communications channels have atrophied. So we're in a far more different situation. And I give you one thing related to that. This was in a world where there were two major nuclear powers separated on opposite sides of the earth, which gave time for decision makers. In a world of 20 or 30 nuclear powers, think of India and Pakistan, decades and decades of hostility, 5-minute flight time for a ballistic missile. That's real crisis instability. If you get to 20 or 30 nuclear powers, if Japan becomes a nuclear power, imagine the reaction in China. If Germany becomes a nuclear power, imagine the reaction for a lot of folks. And you will not have these established means of communication. You will have much tighter. Everybody will be on what's called a launch on warning status, which means when they see the missiles fly, they respond before their missiles are destroyed in turn, which puts you on a hair trigger and makes nuclear accidents and miscalculation infinitely more likely. If you want to read, if you want to not be able to sleep at night, there is a great book. It's called Command and Control.
Oh, no.
Eric Schlosser, that talks about how many times we almost screwed this up. And in fact,
Oh my gosh.
How many times we dropped nuclear weapons on the United States? We did.
Hey, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I gotta come right back. My mother-in-law is downstairs. We're in end of life care with her, and she's calling. So I need to step out. No. I want to come right back. I just need to go make sure what she needs. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Smith. And thank you, Bob. This was a great analysis. Okay. And
I'm safe.
I have a question in chat from Chuck Somerville. Hello, Chuck. This is Dean Somerville, our from College of Science formerly. And he asks, would you be willing to share draft language for emails to send to representatives encouraging to support military aid to Ukraine? Would you have access to such formula?
If you go to house.gov or senate.gov, you can get everybody's email. You can get their phone. It's really good to call. The best thing to do is call. That actually registered with these people more than anything. Emails, they discard. What you want to do is you want to call these representatives. What you want is the phone to ring all the time. If the phone rings all the time, that gets their attention.
I also had some live update right now. This second, the House passes some we need to look up right now the live feed because House passes the decision of some kind. I'm not sure, but
They were voting on 702, rule for the surveillance program 702.
yes,
The FISA Act. That would be good if that passed.
it passed, I think. Thank you. Any more questions? John, you have had hand on, please.
I was just going to ask Bob. Dr. Smith mentioned going to DC. Is there somebody covering your congressional representative?
Just talk to Patrick, and he's going to go see Brad Winstrup.
Is that the name? What is the name? Brad
Winstrup. He's a gettable guy. He's retiring, so he is not as vulnerable to pressure as some of the others. He's also a veteran. He was a doctor deployed to Iraq, I think a surgeon. And he is on the priority list. If I had been able to go, I was going to make a beeline for his office, but yeah. I will be calling him.
Okay. And Victor, if you can just give me about 20 seconds at the end to talk about upcoming events when you're ready to close it up. Absolutely,
sure. I just want to make sure we're nearing to the end of the hour, and of course I have this note in chat about guns of August and the missiles of October from 1974. And if I'm allowed to make one venture into history, I grew up in the Soviet Union, as you know, and this day we all would be celebrating the first man in space, Yuri Gagarin, 12th of April, and today we don't look up so much in all senses. So the space race already becomes almost known only in military context, I'm afraid. So yes, of course, Yuri Gagarin was the first survived person who landed, as we might know. Thank you. And if we have no more comments, please, John, the microphone is yours. Please talk about further.
I'll make it brief. Just in terms of chronological order, on April 22nd, we'll be doing a Earth Day event at Central City on 14th Street West around the gazebo. We'll have our sunflower seeds pop-up tent and merch and so on and information. Then on April 24th, we will be at Ritter Park with the Huntington Women's Club. And we've made a new partnership with Marie Shannon, who is works with the Greater Huntington Parks, but she wouldn't mind me telling you that her son was a veteran of the Iraq wars and passed away because of that last November at the age of 37, thanks to Saddam Hussein blowing up all those oil plants. She has an organization called Mother Nature's Cupboard, and she's pouring her grief into support for us and others. So we will split. She's a very good horticultural person. Anyway, she's got 100,000 sunflower seeds, so she's in the process of packing those up and making seedlings for sale. So we'll be splitting profits with her on those days. May 18th, our 5K race for Ukraine, run walk for Ukraine, 9 o'clock, Ritter Park. It was very successful last year. We made over $44,000. This year, we're also adding an art fest. In fact, Bob's mother's work will be featured, as well as Linda Childers, who's a local artist here, will be presenting us an original painting to be auctioned off. Plus, we'll be making prints of that. That's May 18th, 9 o'clock, Ritter Park. August 24th, our Taste of Ukraine and Ukraine Independence Day. The local restaurant SIP will be catering that with Ukrainian food. It'll be at Alchemy Theater that evening. $40 a person, $75 a couple. That's at Geneva Kent, the old Geneva Kent Elementary School. And I'll need Dr. Shrey to help me with this, but a fellow named Yuri Fedinsky, who is a Kobzar, like a traveling musician. Does that sound right?
Yes, yes, it does. A bard. It's our word for bard. Yes.
And I'm in discussions with him about coming to the U.S. He actually was raised in the U.S. and went back to Ukraine. He makes his own authentic, original Ukrainian instruments and
Bandura.
Yes, it's kind of like a harp and guitar combined.
Yeah, exactly.
And he is currently touring in the UK. And if we can get him, it'll be a major coup d'etat for us. But he seemed interested, and he was planning on coming to the US anyway. So that's August 24th. And so that's it. Yes, exactly.
So this is actually a drawing. And Victor, if you can jump in and help me explain the origins. This is done by a 13-year-old girl named Anya from Kherson, Ukraine. I believe one of our friends of our program was raising funds, and the children from that area sent us these amazing pictures. So here you have a very traditional Ukrainian traveling singer, a kobzar, which would be like a traveling bard, with the bandura, which is exactly as you say, a combination. It looks like a guitar, but it's really like more of a harp, dressed in the traditional Ukrainian outfit in front of a destroyed building in Kherson, Ukraine. Victor, can you give the little context for this?
I will remind those who didn't see it before. This picture comes directly from art therapy studio of a great friend of our program, Margarita Kuznetsova, in Kamensk of Dnipro region. And she was on this program. If you look at our recordings several times, pictures drawn by her children. She works with displaced children from Mariupol, Kherson, and other regions, and a lot of other activities what their studio is doing. But this picture, among others, came to Charleston, West Virginia, courtesy of our other friends, Boris and Natalia Chertkovsky, and they were auctioning those pictures several times within here in West Virginian towns, and sending money back to those children who earned in this way. And this is a great connection, and we thank everyone involved in this and other art activities to help Ukraine.
I may have cut off Pastor Yeager, and I apologize for that. Pastor Yeager, were you done?
No, I'm good. Again, April 22nd, April 24th, May 18th, and August 24th. I'll put those in the chat.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving us all these updates, John. And we are amazed and honored and thankful for everything that this local group is doing. We have been interviewing on this program for over 100 weeks, people from all over the world, closer and farther from Ukraine, but it's important in those historical times to remind our friends that we stand with them, and even from across the ocean, you can see and hear about little help which happens every moment in many places. Thank you, and Katerina, please say a few words in Ukraine.
Дорогі браття і сестри в Україні, ми зберігаємо вас у наших щоденних думках і молитвах. Нехай милосердний Бог тримає вас у своїй опіці. До наступного тижня. Прощаємося.
Слава Україні!
Героям слава!